Hello, and welcome to this beautiful wintry Friday. Wish we would have had this at Christmas time, but better at Halloween and now at the mid of January than never, I guess. So today I'm going to do something a little different rather than go over what happened in the market this past week. It was a little slow everywhere. I already put the infographics out at 8 a.m. this morning, so everything you can see is there. I will follow up on those monthly, but I'm going to try to venture out on some topics that have been coming up quite a bit. I meant to do this last Friday. I ended up having a meeting and then the day just went crazy, so I wasn't able to go live at that point. So lots of confusion about agency relationships in real estate. I want to preface this by saying I am not an attorney. I'm a licensed broker in the state of Ohio. So at any time you can go get legal advice. I'm never stopping you from doing that. This is how I present agency to my clients, so that way you guys can know. I'm having a lot of questions from agents, buyers, sellers, all the like, about how agency works. So how I handle agency is, first thing we should be going over with you is the Consumer Guide to Agency Relationships. I think Facebook is looking wonky, so sorry about that. So Consumer Guide to Agency Relationships, no matter what realtor you meet with, buyer or seller, they should be going over this form with you. So if you're not working with my company, it won't have my company's name. It should have their company's name. So what the Consumer Guide is, I call it the HIPAA of real estate. I know legally it's not. They're two different things, but I like to add humor into everything, so you'll hear me go through that. So what this talks about is how specifically our company handles agency in transactions. So I can represent you as a seller only, I could represent a buyer only, or our office allows dual agency where I can represent both the buyer and the seller. In that case, it's more of a meeting of the minds. I can't advocate or negotiate on anybody's behalf. I do have to be honest, fair, help get through the transaction. This should not be a self-seeking, I want both sides of the commission. Yes, that's a bonus, but really the goal is to help both clients meet the best goal. And then we work with other realtors, of course, so any company is welcome to sell my properties. I don't care, as long as you're licensed in the state of Ohio. The goal is to get it sold for the seller, right? And then it also talks about, so it's 2 pages long, and it just tells you that kind of stuff. And then it ends with fair housing statement. All we care about is the color of money. If you have money, we'll sell it to you. That's all we care about. If you care about anything else, don't be a realtor. And then it specifically says in the last paragraph, because it is important you have this information, Ohio law requires that we ask you to sign to acknowledge receipt of this pamphlet. Your signature will not obligate you to work with our company if you choose not to do so. So you should be going over this. This does not make you work with me. This just tells you how it can happen. Now, there's a lot of other things that could go into if you decide to look at a property with me and write with somebody else, but this should be gone over the first time you meet. If you're not comfortable signing the first time, take it home, read it over, ask an attorney, whatever it may be, and then sign it. But we do need this to get signed. So another thing that we go over, so this is pre-paperwork, right? When we're having a buyer's consult, when we're doing a listing, when we're meeting early on in the relationship, a lot of times you'll get these signed at a house. So back in the day, I've been doing this a while, there used to be a threshold rule. I couldn't walk over a threshold until we signed a paper like this. Had a lot of angry people who wouldn't sign it and they couldn't get in the house. So we are not that kind of person. So anymore, we don't have to be. So, and then the next thing is the agency disclosure statement. This you go over when you find a property and you want to buy, because this is property specific. This lets you know who represents whom in the transaction. English teachers, correct me if that's wrong, because I say that all the time. So this lets you know who handles what in the deal. So at the top, it should have the property address. We should all be on board that you're buying the right property, right? And then the next part is the buyer's name and the seller's name. Pet peeve is blanks. We should know who's buying, right? The buyer and the seller. That's pretty easy. there's 3 different sections here that can be filled out. The first one is 2 different agents, 2 different brokerages. I see my girl Sarah Risen with Century 21 Bolties on here. So let's say I have the buyer, I represent the buyer. Weichert Realtors Morgan Realty Groups represent the buyer. Sarah Risen with Century 21 Bolte, she represents the seller. 2 totally different agencies, 2 totally different agents. Easy peasy. Section 1. Section 2 talks about if I and a different agent in my company represent the buyer and the seller. So it explains that 2 agents in Weichert Realtors Morgan Realty Group, one works for the buyer, one works for the seller, and we have 3 brokers, so we can be in a position where our broker is not always in a dual agent relationship, meaning they have to be a neutral party. So I'll bring you a buyer. And then in this section, there's also one where it states every person in the agency works for every client. We don't do that. So if you work with me or my company, you'll never see that section part of section 2 filled out. But you might see the middle because we sell each other's listings quite a bit. The third talks about being the only agent involved. Being the only agent involved does not necessarily mean you're a dual agent. So let's say I have the seller and a buyer wishes to be unrepresented. They can represent themselves and I would still be the only agent involved. So it gives a little option right here. When I update this, I'm going to add it in so you can screen share. But it says represent only the buyer or seller. So I could be the only agent involved and only represent one side. I forgot what I was going to say. Or I could be a dual agent where I represent both sides. Now, the second page of this agency disclosure specifically talks about dual agency, what I can and can't do. These forms are provided to us, by the way, by the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Real Estate and Professional Licensing. So as a dual agent, I have to treat both clients honestly. In my opinion, I wouldn't be in business after 23 years if I wasn't, but we know people. Disclose latent, not readily observable material defects to the purchaser if known. If I know something's wrong with the home, I better disclose it, right? Provide information regarding lenders, inspectors, and professionals. That should be in your packet that you get the first time you meet. At least that's what I get you. Provide market information available from a property listing service or public records. You should know what your comparables are to what you're buying. Even if I'm a dual agent, I can do that. Prepare and present all offers and counter offers. That should be done without question. And assist both parties in completing the steps necessary to fulfill the transaction, the terms of the contract. What I cannot do is disclose information, right? I can't disclose personal information or make an adverse effect on one of the parties' position in the transaction unless authorized or disclosed by the client or required by law. I can't advocate or negotiate on the behalf of either the buyer and the seller in that case. And I can't suggest or recommend specific terms, including price or disclosed terms of what, hey, I know my buyer's really willing to pay that. Why are we doing that? So you shouldn't be doing that anyways, but you can't do that in dual agency. And then I can't engage in contact contrary to the instructions of either party or act in a biased manner on behalf of either party. This is agency, right? So there's a lot of confusion about agencies going. I know these lawsuits have everybody in an uproar. Maybe you don't even know about them, but you know, real estate lawsuits about how compensation all works and who gets what part of the pie. But this at least lets you know how you can be represented at a transaction. Again, I'm not an attorney. Always seek out legal advice. I would never stop you from seeking out legal advice. Number 1, that would be illegal. And number 2, it'd just be plain dumb. So if you have any questions about real estate, I'd be happy to help. Alex Morgan Johnson, Weichert Realtors, Morgan Realty Group. Thank you so much and enjoy the snow. Bye.